The planet Vorath was not kind to visitors. Its forests stretched endlessly under twin moons, and the night brought temperatures that could kill an unprepared traveler within hours. Dr. Sarah Chen knew this when she accepted the assignment. The Galactic Survey Commission needed someone to study the Vorathi, a species of wolf-like beings who had recently achieved spaceflight. They were proud, fierce, and deeply suspicious of outsiders. Every previous diplomatic team had failed. The Vorathi saw weakness in their careful words and polished manners. They respected strength, and strength alone. Sarah was not a diplomat. She was a xenobiologist with 20 years of field work on hostile worlds. She had lived among the insectoid crics for 3 years. She had survived the poison jungles of Murata Prime. When the commission asked her to make first contact with the Vorathi, she packed her gear and left within a day. She did not bring weapons. She did not bring guards. She brought only her equipment, her knowledge, and her stubborn human will. The Vorathi allowed her to camp at the edge of their territory. This was not hospitality. It was a test. They wanted to see how long the strange, hairless creature would survive before begging to leave. The alpha of the local pack, a massive male named Groth, had made his contempt clear. Humans were small. Humans were soft. Humans belonged in their metal ships, not in the wild forests of Vorath. He gave Sarah 30 days. He expected her to last perhaps 5. Sarah set up her tent in a clearing near a frozen stream. The location was strategic. She had access to water, and the trees provided some shelter from the wind. She spent her first week observing the pack from a distance. The Vorathi lived in family groups of 20 to 30 individuals. They hunted together, slept in communal dens, and raised their young as a collective responsibility. The cubs were the heart of the pack. They were protected, cherished, and never left alone. Sarah watched the adults take turns guarding them, teaching them, playing with them. She saw how the pack's mood changed when the cubs were near. Even Groth, with his cold eyes and scarred muzzle, became gentle when the little ones climbed over him. The storm came on the 12th night. Sarah had seen bad weather before, but nothing like this. The wind screamed through the trees like a living thing. Snow fell so thick that she could not see her hand in front of her face. The temperature dropped far below what her equipment had predicted. She sealed her tent and activated the emergency heating unit. It was designed for conditions exactly like this. She would be uncomfortable, but she would survive. The sound came around midnight. It was faint at first, almost lost in the howling wind. Sarah thought she had imagined it. Then it came again, closer this time. A high-pitched whine, desperate and afraid. She knew that sound. Every xenobiologist learned to recognize distress calls across species. Something young was in trouble. Sarah opened her tent and looked out into the white chaos. The cold hit her like a physical blow. Her breath froze in her lungs. She grabbed her thermal suit and struggled into it, her fingers already going numb. The sound came again, and now she could tell the direction. It was coming from the east, near the frozen stream. She found them huddled under a fallen tree. 3 Vorathi cubs, no more than a few months old. Their fur was matted with ice. Their eyes were wide with terror. The smallest one was not moving. Sarah did not hesitate. She scooped up all 3 and carried them back to her tent. They were too cold to struggle. They were too cold to do anything except tremble. Inside the tent, Sarah worked quickly. She stripped off her thermal suit and wrapped the cubs in her emergency blankets. The smallest one worried her most. Its breathing was shallow and its heartbeat was fading. Sarah pressed the cub against her chest, using her own body heat to warm it. She had done this before on other worlds, with other creatures. The principle was always the same. Warmth meant life. Cold meant death. The night became a battle. Sarah held the smallest cub for hours, breathing warm air onto its face, rubbing its limbs to restore circulation. The other 2 cubs watched her with their golden eyes. They did not understand what she was doing. They only knew that the strange creature was warm and the tent was safe, and the terrible storm could not reach them here. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the tent fabric, all 3 cubs were alive. The smallest one had finally stopped shivering. It had fallen asleep against Sarah's chest, its tiny claws tangled in her shirt. The other 2 had curled up on either side of her, their bodies pressed close for warmth. Sarah was exhausted. Her muscles ached from holding the same position for so long, but she did not move. She did not want to disturb them. The search party arrived with the sunrise. Groth led them himself. He had spent the entire night looking for the missing cubs. The storm had scattered the pack, and by the time they regrouped, 3 of the youngest were gone. Groth had followed their scent through the blizzard, but the trail kept disappearing under fresh snow. He had almost given up hope when one of his hunters caught a faint trace leading toward the humans' camp. Groth expected to find bodies. He expected to find the cubs, frozen and dead, with the human cowering inside her flimsy shelter. Instead, he found something that stopped him in his tracks. The 3 cubs were standing in front of the tent. They had woken before Sarah and crawled outside to greet the dawn. But they had not wandered off. They had not tried to find their way home. Instead, they had positioned themselves around the tent entrance, their small bodies forming a protective circle. When they saw Groth approaching, they did not run to him. They growled. Groth had never seen cubs growl at an adult. It was unheard of. Cubs were submissive by nature. They did not challenge, they did not threaten, they did not defend. But these 3 cubs were defending. They were defending the human who had saved them. Sarah emerged from the tent, blinking in the bright morning light. She saw Groth and his hunters standing in the snow. She saw the cubs arrayed before her like tiny soldiers. She understood immediately what was happening. The cubs had imprinted on her. In their minds, she was now part of the pack. She had kept them warm through the longest night of their lives. She had held them when they were afraid. She had not let them die. Groth approached slowly. His hunters hung back, uncertain. The alpha stopped a few feet from Sarah and studied her with his amber eyes. He was looking for something. Weakness, perhaps. Fear. Some sign that the human was not worthy of the loyalty his cubs were showing. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. She did not bow. She did not look away. She simply stood there, tired and cold and unbowed, and waited. The silence stretched between them. Then Groth did something that shocked his entire pack. He lowered his head. Not much, just a slight dip of his muzzle, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. But among the Varathi, it meant everything. It was acknowledgement. It was respect. It was acceptance. The cubs bounded toward Groth, yipping with excitement. They told him everything in their high-pitched voices, the cold, the dark, the strange creature who had carried them to safety, the warmth of her body, the gentleness of her hands, the way she had fought to keep them alive when everything outside was trying to kill them. Groth listened without interrupting. When they finished, he looked at Sarah again. "You did not have to save them," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "They are not your pack. They are not your blood. You owed them nothing." Sarah shrugged. "They were cold. They were scared. They needed help. Many creatures need help. Most are left to die." "I'm not most creatures," Sarah said. "I'm human." Groth considered this. The concept was strange to him. The Varathi helped their own and left outsiders to fate. It was the natural order. Resources were limited. Survival was hard. You could not waste energy on those who did not share your blood. But here was this human, this small, soft creature without claws or fangs, who had risked her own life to save cubs she had no connection to. It made no sense by Varathi standards, and yet the cubs were alive. They were standing there, healthy and whole, because a stranger had chosen kindness over indifference. "Come," Groth said finally. "You will eat with the pack." It was the highest honor he could offer. Sarah followed him through the snow with the 3 cubs trotting at her heels. They would not leave her side. They had decided she was theirs now, and Vorathi cubs were nothing if not stubborn. The other pack members watched in amazement as the human walked among them. They had expected her to fail. They had expected her to prove that humans were weak and worthless. Instead, she had proven something else entirely. Humans were strange. Humans were soft on the outside, but hard in ways that mattered. Humans would walk into a blizzard to save children who were not their own. Humans would hold dying cubs against their hearts and breathe life back into them. Humans would stand in front of an alpha and meet his gaze without fear, because they knew they had done something worth respecting. The diplomatic mission was supposed to last 30 days. Sarah stayed for 3 years. She learned the Vorathi language fluently. She participated in their hunts, their festivals, their mourning rituals. She watched the 3 cubs she had saved grow into strong young adults. They never forgot her. Even when they had cubs of their own, they would bring them to Sarah's tent and tell them the story of the longest night. When Sarah finally left Vorath, Groth walked her to her shuttle personally. The entire pack had gathered to see her off. It was unprecedented. The Vorathi did not mourn departures. They did not form attachments to outsiders. But Sarah was not an outsider anymore. She was pack. She was family. She was the human who had taught them that strength was not just about claws and teeth. Sometimes strength was choosing to care when caring cost you something. Sometimes strength was walking into a storm because someone small needed you. "Will you return?" Groth asked as Sarah prepared to board. "Someday," she said, "when the commission needs me again." "The commission does not matter," Groth said. "Will you return because you wish to?" Sarah smiled. "Yes, I will return." Groth nodded. That was enough. The shuttle lifted off, and Sarah watched through the window as the forest shrank below her. She could see the pack still gathered in the clearing. She could see 3 figures standing apart from the rest, their eyes fixed on the sky. Her cubs. Always her cubs. The report Sarah filed with the Galactic Survey Commission was short and simple. The Vorathi, she wrote, were not a species to be conquered or controlled. They were a species to be respected. They understood strength, yes, but they also understood loyalty, sacrifice, and love. Any civilization that wanted to work with them needed to prove they shared those values. Fancy words would not impress them. Expensive gifts would not buy their trust. Only actions mattered. Only the willingness to give something of yourself for someone else. The commission took her advice. They sent a new diplomatic team, one trained in compassion rather than negotiation. Within a decade, the Vorathi had become one of humanity's closest allies. They fought beside human soldiers in 3 different conflicts. They traded freely with human merchants. They sent their young to human universities and welcomed human students to their own. And every year, on the anniversary of the longest night, the Vorathi held a celebration in Sarah Chen's honor. It was called the Festival of Warmth, and it commemorated the day a small, soft creature proved that the universe was kinder than anyone had dared to believe. Sarah attended when she could. She was old now, her hair gray and her movements slow, but when she walked among the Vorathi, she was still the same woman who had walked into a blizzard to save 3 frightened cubs. She was still pack. She was still family. And the cubs she had saved, now graying themselves, still stood guard over her whenever she visited. They had never stopped. They never would. Some debts, they believed, could never be fully repaid. You simply honored them, year after year, generation after generation, until the stars themselves grew cold. That was the Vorathi way. And somewhere along the line, it had become the human way too.